The storm rolled down from the mountains like an angry beast that night, swallowing the small cabin tucked deep in the pines. Elijah Carter, known to the folks in the valley as the Mountain Man, stood at his window, his silhouette cut sharp against the dim glow of the oil lamp. His beard was thick, his shoulders broad, his eyes hardened by years of solitude and survival. He had built this place with his own hands, carving out a life where most men had given up. But strength had its shadow. Behind his stoic face lay a heart that had long forgotten the warmth of laughter, the sound of a gentle voice, or the simple comfort of companionship. For Elijah, the mountains were a refuge, but also a prison, and the silence pressed heavy against him with each passing season. That winter, desperation had finally forced him to do something he never thought he would: pay for a woman to cook and keep his house. Not for company, not for love, at least that was what he told himself, but for survival. He needed help, and the ad he posted in town was answered by someone he never expected: a young widow, swollen with child, who had nowhere left to go. She wasn't what Elijah thought he was paying for. She wasn't strong in the way he imagined, and she wasn't hardened like him. She was fragile, wary, and carrying both life and grief in her eyes. And yet, from the moment she crossed his threshold, dripping wet from the cold, clutching her bundle of belongings, Elijah Carter's life would never be the same. Before we go deeper into this powerful journey of redemption, kindness, and second chances, we'd love for you to take a moment to support this channel. If you believe that kindness has the power to transform lives, if you believe people deserve second chances, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Stories Collection, so more hearts can be touched by stories like this one. The woman's name was Anna. She was not much more than 22, her face soft but pale, her eyes carrying the sorrow of someone who had seen too much of the world too soon. Her husband had died in a logging accident the previous spring, leaving her with debts she could not pay and a baby she had not planned to raise alone. The town whispered behind her back, some with pity, others with disdain. She had no family to turn to, no safe place to sleep. When she saw Elijah's notice for a housekeeper and cook, she knew it was her only chance at shelter before the winter swallowed her whole. Elijah did not speak much when she arrived. His silence filled the cabin like smoke, thick and unsettling. He showed her the small spare room, barely more than a cot and a chest, and left her to settle in. The agreement was simple: she cooked, kept the house, and in return had food and shelter. But Anna soon realized that Elijah's needs went deeper than he admitted. The man could survive on dried meat and black coffee, but he had forgotten what it meant to sit at a table where food smelled of care and seasoning, where bread was baked warm and fresh, where the simple act of eating could feel like home. At first, Anna was timid in her duties. Her hands trembled when she kneaded dough, her eyes darting toward him, expecting judgment. Elijah ate in silence, never praising, never criticizing, just chewing with that unreadable expression. But something stirred in him when he saw her move around the kitchen, her rounded belly leading her steps, her eyes occasionally softening when she thought he wasn't watching. She wasn't just cooking, she was bringing life back into the cabin. The fire seemed warmer. The silence seemed less suffocating. And though Elijah told himself he had hired her for practical reasons, his chest ached with something unfamiliar every time he caught her humming softly to herself. But not all days were gentle. Anna carried her own burdens. Some nights, Elijah heard her weeping quietly in her room, muffling the sound against her pillow. The weight of loss, the fear of the future, and the exhaustion of carrying a child alone pressed heavy on her. Elijah wanted to ignore it, to retreat into his solitude. Yet he found himself standing outside her door, fists clenched, fighting the urge to comfort her. He didn't know how to speak words of tenderness. He had been hardened by a lifetime of fending for himself, where emotions were weaknesses that the mountains punished. Still, he could not walk away. As weeks turned to months, an unspoken bond grew between them. Elijah began chopping more wood than usual, making sure her room stayed warmer at night. He brought her fresh berries when he returned from his hunts, even though he never admitted they were for her. And when the first snowstorm trapped them indoors for 3 days, it was Anna who filled the silence with stories. About her childhood, about the songs her mother used to sing, about dreams she once dared to hold. Elijah listened quietly, never interrupting. But each word chipped away at the fortress around his heart. Then came the night when Anna went into labor. The storm outside was merciless, howling through the trees, rattling the walls of the cabin. Panic surged in Elijah like he had never felt before. He had wrestled bears, faced blizzards, fought through broken bones. But nothing had terrified him more than seeing Anna doubled over in pain, clutching his arm, her face pale and sweat-soaked. He had no midwife, no doctor, no one to guide him but sheer instinct. For hours, he stayed by her side, fetching water, holding her hand, whispering clumsy reassurances he never thought he could say. He prayed, something he hadn't done in years, that she and the baby would survive. By dawn, the cries of a newborn pierced the cabin, sharp and beautiful. Anna collapsed, exhausted but alive, tears streaming down her cheeks as Elijah placed the tiny, squirming child into her arms. For the first time in decades, Elijah Carter felt grace. Pure, unearned, overwhelming grace. It wasn't just that a new life had entered the world. It was that, through this woman and her child, life had entered his. The days that followed changed him more than the years of solitude ever could. He learned to cradle the infant, awkward at first, his massive hands dwarfing the tiny body. He found himself waking in the night, at the sound of soft whimpers, stumbling to the cradle. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He watched Anna glow with a strength he had not seen before, her love for her child radiating through every movement. And slowly, Elijah began to understand. She hadn't just come to cook or clean. She had come to teach him the very thing he thought he had no use for: grace, tenderness, and the quiet courage of love. As the seasons shifted, so did Elijah's heart. The mountain man who had once lived for himself now rose each morning with a different purpose. His cabin was no longer just wood and stone. It was a home. And though he never spoke of it openly, he knew that Anna and her child had given him a gift he could never repay, a second chance at being human, at belonging, at feeling. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that grace often finds us in the most unexpected places, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Your support helps us continue bringing these stories of hope and transformation to life, reaching more people who may need to hear them. And before we end, here's a special request just for you. Drop a comment below and tell us what grace means to you. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Elijah Carter had always believed that a man's worth was measured by what he could endure. The mountain taught him that lesson early. Winters were merciless, summers unforgiving. To live here meant to accept hardship as constant company. He had buried friends in avalanches, patched his own wounds when no doctor could be found, and spent nights fighting off the loneliness that crept in like frost under the door. He wore his solitude like armor, convinced that needing no one was the highest form of strength. But when Anna and her unborn child entered his cabin, the mountain seemed to whisper a truth he had long resisted: that strength without compassion was only half a life. The first weeks were uneasy. Elijah often caught himself grumbling under his breath when Anna fussed over the fire or insisted on sweeping every corner of the cabin. He didn't understand why she bothered. To him, a home was only meant to keep a man warm and dry. But Anna treated the cabin as if it were sacred ground. She laid small touches everywhere, folding blankets with care, arranging herbs in jars, even placing a wildflower in a tin cup by the window. It unsettled Elijah. It also softened him in ways he didn't admit. He found himself watching her when she wasn't looking, noticing the determination in her movements, despite her wariness. There was a quiet dignity about her, something the mountain itself seemed to honor. At night, while the wind howled, Elijah sat by the fire pretending to whittle wood, but his ears were tuned to Anna's faint voice. As she sang lullabies to her unborn child, her voice wasn't strong, sometimes it cracked with emotion. Yet, it carried something he had almost forgotten existed: hope. Each note carved at the walls around his heart, and though he tried to resist, Elijah found himself listening as if the songs were the only warmth that truly mattered. Anna, on her side, had expected Elijah to be harsh, maybe even cruel. The town had whispered about him, the reclusive mountain man who trusted no one. But she found something different. Yes, he was rough around the edges, and his silence could be suffocating. Yet, he had not turned her away. He had given her a roof, food, and safety. More than that, in small ways, he protected her. When she slipped carrying a bucket of water, Elijah was there in an instant, steadying her with those strong, calloused hands. When she tired, he wordlessly chopped more wood, so she wouldn't have to strain. He never spoke of kindness, but his actions revealed it in quiet, unmistakable ways. The day she went into labor tested them both. Anna's cries filled the cabin, raw and desperate, echoing off the log walls. Elijah's heart thundered in his chest. He felt helpless, like the mountains themselves were mocking him for all his supposed strength. He whispered prayers he hadn't uttered since boyhood, fumbling through instructions from old memories of livestock births, knowing this was no comparison to the fragile life now struggling to enter the world. Hours dragged like years. Anna's grip crushed his hand, her tears soaking into his shirt as he knelt beside her. He had fought wild beasts, but never had he felt so small, so powerless, and so desperate for mercy. When the baby's cry finally broke through, Elijah's knees nearly gave out. He stared at the tiny life, swaddled awkwardly in cloth, and felt something crack open inside him. The sound was not just the beginning of a child's life. It was the breaking of his own chains. For the first time in decades, Elijah wept. He wept not from sorrow, but from relief, from awe, from a tenderness he thought the mountain had long ago stolen from him. Anna, exhausted, looked at him then, not as a hired cook, not as a desperate widow, but as someone who saw the truth of who he was becoming. In that moment, their lives shifted. The unspoken contract of survival was replaced with something deeper, a shared grace neither had expected to find. The days that followed taught Elijah lessons no winter storm ever could. He learned patience as he held the newborn, rocking her gently by the fire. He learned humility as Anna showed him how even small things, a bowl of broth, a soft blanket, a whispered word, could heal weary spirits. And he learned that strength was not measured by how much weight a man could carry alone, but by how willing he was to carry the burdens of others. The mountain man had paid for a cook. What he received was a teacher, a healer, and the first glimpse of grace he had known in years.